The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar, Tap on Workstation Optimization for Ease of Use, with Aaron Wooten, Chief Information Officer at Henry Ford Allegiance Health, and Ray Jaksic, Chief Technology Officer at Cortex Services. During today's session, we will be discussing Henry Ford Allegiance Health's desktop virtualization implementation called Tap on Workstation, or TOW, and their implementation of hyperconvergence to support that effort. My name is Hannah Bagley, and I will be moderating today's session. Before we get started, there are a few housekeeping items to address. Today's session is being recorded and will be available to you. We also will be providing the PDF version of today's case. If you have any questions during the session, please enter them in the question box. And more information can be found at cortexservices.com. I'd like to introduce to you our panel today. First, we have Aaron Wooten of Henry Ford Allegiance Health. Aaron, please tell us about yourself and Henry Ford Allegiance Health.
Thanks, Hannah. This is Aaron Wooten. Again, I'm the Vice President and Chief Information Officer for what is now Henry Ford Allegiance Health after a recent merger with Henry Ford. I've been in Allegiance for about 4 years now and have 15 years experience in health information technology overall. I've preemptively used a couple lifelines as a phone a friend. We've got our project manager, Justin Van Andel, on the phone, and also Luke Peters, who's a senior systems and infrastructure engineer who's assigned to this project. So if there's any technical questions, I may defer to them. But Allegiance Health overall is a 480-bed hospital with a long-term acute care facility as well. We have a large ambulatory network of about 40 sites of care, and as I said, recently became part of the Henry Ford family. So we're starting to work very closely with Henry Ford. On the inpatient side, we're on McKesson Horizon, and on the ambulatory side, we're on NextGen. But we're currently pursuing a project or a large initiative to move to Epic. In terms of the Tap on Workstation, that project was primarily around the inpatient setting, but we also rolled out Citrix to the ambulatory setting as well. So I appreciate everyone joining the call, and hopefully we'll have a good discussion today, and look forward to talking to everyone. Thanks.
Thank you, Aaron. Next, we have Ray Jaksic of Cortex Services. Ray, please tell us about yourself and Cortex Services.
Thanks, Hannah. My name is Ray Jaksic. I'm our Chief Technology Officer here at Cortex, and I'm also one of our principal founders, so I was here from day one. Our mission has been simple. We created from day one, inception of the company, and that is to ensure our customers' projects succeed, no exceptions. Our Cortex primary purpose is improving our clients' end-user experiences and IT operations through virtualization, mobility, and cloud. Approximately 75% of our revenue is with healthcare organizations, and our customers range from 100-bed community hospitals to large national multi-hospital health systems with tens of thousands of beds and clinical users. I'm responsible for defining and supporting our current solution offerings, as well as defining the future needs of our customers, healthcare market, and making sure that Cortex has relevant solutions to meet those needs in the future. Myself and my technology office team have worked extensively with Henry Ford Allegiance Health to move them through the virtual clinical workstation deployment lifecycle from ROI, budget, pilot to production deployment.
Thank you, Ray. Before we dive into the panel discussion, Ray, can you please give us an overview of the desktop virtualization solution implemented at Henry Ford Allegiance Health?
So sure, Hannah. A few things about the solution we end up with is, again, we talked about it, but the project code name was Tap on Workstation, or TOW. It was 600 workstations and approximately 2,750 users. It leverages AppSense Desktop Now, Imprivata OneSign with authentication management and their VDA module for virtual desktop access, RFID-based badge readers to create more secure and easier authentication. The back-end infrastructure is a hyperconverged infrastructure by Nutanix, and they've deployed Citrix Zen Desktop with a combination of desktops based on workflows. The typical nurse clinical user use cases are a published desktop or RDS desktop, and for higher end use cases that are more demanding, typically like users of Dragon Dictation, we have a VDI desktop for those workflows. And applications are delivered via a combination of AppV as well as locally installed MSIs into the virtual desktops. Because the fleet of PCs was fairly new that Allegiance Health had, they elected to keep their endpoint was to reuse and or repurpose existing PCs with the intention to implement zero clients in the future as their PC investments start to fail.
Thank you, Ray. Let's dive into the panel discussion. Aaron, what was it that drove Henry Ford Allegiance Health to implement virtual desktops?
Really, it was around the clinician experience, so both physician and nursing in the hospital. We were struggling with the end user devices as they were currently configured, and in terms of how mobile our workforce was, switching between different devices within the patient care setting, and also the standardization of the desktop layer. So making sure that it looks the same for them whenever they come up to a machine. They don't have to adjust to different applications being available or inconsistencies in the environment. And then finally, from the IT side, it was really looking at how can we increase our flexibility? How can we be able to quickly deploy new applications and make adjustments to the desktop layer without having the struggles of either touching each machine or having each machine be smart enough that we have to interact with it or that something could go wrong at that desktop layer. So really making the desktop layer like a dumb terminal. Those things combined really we felt would be the driving force in making a better experience for our clinicians and our staff that work in the hospital.
Thank you. And now that you have had the Tap on Workstation in place for coming on to a year, what were some of the top 2 or 3 benefits that were achieved?
Just as I spoke to, user productivity. So we were able to reduce login times by about 50%, and we had the roaming sessions so that people could go from one workstation to another without fear of losing any work. When we looked at it from an IT perspective and a financial perspective, what we really saw was from the IT side about a budget neutral, but the efficiency that we could gain by putting this in place, when we looked at that, it was kind of a no-brainer to do something like this. So our finance team looks at things really in terms of hard dollars and soft dollars, and the hard dollars are very defined. Where we get into a little bit of trouble is with that soft dollar piece. But when you come in with a hard dollar amount of zero, over, I think it was 3 years or so, we were able to get a $0 ROI in terms of hard dollars. And then you look at some of the benefits we had achieved in terms of, the initial tap on of less than 20 seconds and reconnects of less than 7 seconds. We looked at the staff and we did some time studies, and we found about 15 minutes per shift per individual could be saved on the side of our users. And then again, as I spoke to, the agility of expanding and changing IT environment and improving the ability to adjust your desktop layer was huge. And finally, the security side of things, being able to make sure that people only have access to the applications they need. And when you combine all those things, it really sums up what we were looking at what we were looking at trying to achieve when we went about this, and we had a very successful project, and I think we were successful in achieving a lot of those goals.
Thanks, Aaron. Ray, as you engaged with Aaron with the Cortex solution for the Tap-On Workstation, can you tell us more about what you saw as the key technical issues facing Allegiance?
Sure. To keep with Aaron's theme, from our perspective, it was performance, performance, performance at a reasonable cost. This was all about the initial problems that they were facing was about faster access to the applications and the tools that doctors and clinicians needed from their desktops. And some of the other things we noticed, as we started to work with Aaron's team is even, people had to walk around to different areas and work on different PCs based on what function those PCs served, meaning to be able to get them in and out fast, it was a generic kiosk desktop, and not all applications and or functionality was available on every machine. So people who wanted to use Office would go in, Microsoft Office would go into certain areas and hit certain machines that way, and then if they didn't need Office and Word docs, then they might go jump onto a different machine closer to patient rooms. So it wasn't them, the end users weren't just being able to go anywhere they wanted and have their toolkit with them. They had to understand where they could find certain tools and walk to those areas and get them. Some of the other things from that perspective that we saw is, again, predictability. In those clinical areas, they were looking for a predictable end user experience, predictability of performance from the clinical desktop. And the way we sort of help with that is, what they have today is there is one non-persistent image, right? So that image changes don't stay with it, all right? When it's rebooted, they get the same desktop, and every single person gets the same desktop. So it's easy and highly scalable solution, so it provides a consistent, repeatable performance for them. Some of the other challenges we had is, especially once they decided they've validated and did their production pilot, they wanted to be live. Once they did the proof of concept, they wanted to be live within the hospital. They had some parameters that said they had to be live within the hospital within 4 months. All right, that was without ordering of hardware, having hardware in place, or anything. So there was a time to market component of this solution, which, the help of our been there, done that experiences and the dedication of their team helped us get there. But the other part that was really key in that was Nutanix. Being able to get a Nutanix infrastructure up within 2 weeks of the time to get a PO, and then start being able to implement right away and spin up VMs within 2 weeks was another key component. So it was an integrated solution that they needed, built on Absence, Nutanix, and Imprivata technologies. And with that, Nutanix gave that speed to delivery that we were working on it within 2 weeks. It also provided modular scale. So as we built onto it, and or in the future, the Legion Health, as they outgrow what infrastructure they have in there, they don't have to buy brand new frames, brand new entire infrastructure. They just buy another node, so they have modular scalability. And from the Absence side of it, we talked about what a persistent desktop does from a repeatable performance, easier to manage, easier to get a consistent performance, but Absence helped provide, from a user perspective, a personalized desktop. So the users get to keep their app settings, their Office settings, move with them every day when they have a desktop, wherever they go. All their settings, even their backgrounds, we want to enable them, are able to go with them. So from the user perspective, they think it's a persistent desktop, and that's what Absence provides. And Imprivata is the key to tying everything together quickly. Imprivata tied together the authentication, providing single sign-on applications to speed up access that way. Imprivata is known as an SSO, but I really consider it a technology broker is how I usually define Imprivata, because it is sort of the piece, it's sort of the glue that holds all the technologies together and ties them together. And that's what we saw.
Thank you. So Aaron, what was the feedback you received from the clinical staff, the doctors and nurses?
So my favorite story after we rolled this out was from Justin, who's on the call today, and he said, you know, I was over in the hospital today, and one of the nurses came up to me, and it's kind of a nurse that he was familiar with, and she was kind of grumpy at times and very difficult, and she came up and she said to him, you know, thank you for making our lives just a little bit easier. And you don't get a lot of positive feedback when you're in information technology, especially in a healthcare environment. And you know, that piece was really the big benefit for us. So when I took over as Chief Information Officer, our information technology department was really looking to reestablish credibility within our user base, because we've had some failures with remote hosting and some other issues, and we kind of had a disconnect, and we weren't really enabling the business. And putting this technology in place really showed that we understood the struggles of our users and that we were willing to do something to make their day just a little bit easier. And that was the most rewarding piece of this, was, you know, reestablishing that credibility and hearing that we're making a difference in terms of the ability of our staff, our clinical staff, to take care of our patients.
And this was your first experience with the hyper-converged infrastructure in implementing Nutanix. Have you seen any significant benefits or differences?
Yes, as Ray kind of spoke to a minute ago, you know, really it simplified the environment and allowed us to deploy much quicker, meaning that if we were to buy the compute, the storage, and the software separately, it would take some time for us to put it together and properly configure, whereas Nutanix comes all prepared, ready to deploy within our existing environment. So the biggest benefit for us was really, you know, within a tight timeline, being able to purchase the Nutanix system and keep that timeline because of how simple the technology is.
And how about security? We hear a lot about data losses these days. Was that a consideration for you as you look to CoreTech to implement VDI?
Yeah, primarily, you know, just a side benefit of putting this in. It wasn't necessarily our first objective or priority, but what it did is it allowed us to make the terminals or the desktop layer dumb and allow us to build that consistent environment. So people then don't have access to applications that they shouldn't have access to. And you know, you already have that layer of protection in terms of passwords for the application, but it's just going an extra layer deep to be able to not even give them the icon that, to be able to access the application at all. And then also from, you know, with HIPAA and information technology from the healthcare side of things, access from home, being able to make sure that, you know, everything's taking place in terms of the activity that you're doing on the servers here. So you don't have a lot of healthcare information that's being sent outside at that point. It's all being managed internally, and then images of what's going on within the server are being sent backwards and forwards. So I'd say that was really the benefit in that regard, but not necessarily something we were concentrated on in the beginning of the project, but a side benefit that we did end up achieving.
And what advice would you give to anyone embarking on a virtual desktop project at this stage? With the benefit of a 20/20 hindsight, what, if anything, would you do differently?
So one of the things I think we took for granted initially was around the retraining of staff. So we thought, you know, we're going to roll this out and people are just going to get it. And what we found was initially people didn't understand how this could change their workflow. So we still saw people signing in and signing out, and you know, they weren't using the badge as much. So some education up front would have allowed them to better understand how they can adjust their workflow to make better use of the new system capabilities. So the best way that we described it is it's like carrying around your computer session in your badge. And when we described it that way to people, they really got it. Then we started seeing them, you know, tapping in, tapping out, moving to different machines. There wasn't that concern that, hey, if I tap into this machine that someone else is working on, they're going to lose their stuff because they knew that that session was with that other person really, and traveling around with that person. So some additional education would have been beneficial. And then, you know, also in terms of the desktop staff, our support staff, really, you know, working with that staff to make sure they understand the change, understand how their job's going to change, because there were a lot of changes in terms of, you know, that desktop layer, and the staff that support it had to adjust to some of those changes. So making sure they were comfortable in their role and how it was going to change. I think those are really the two biggest lessons learned we had as we rolled this out.
And what about future plans? Where are you focusing your efforts now? New departments, new functionality?
Right, so we are on McKesson Horizon, as I spoke to, so obviously that's being sunset in March 2018. So we're currently embarking on a project to implement Epic here, and we're looking forward to the benefits of Tap-On in that regard in terms of being able to deploy the application to thousands of devices quickly and easily, and also you know, so in the future, as we look at how care is changing, really being able to take advantage of some of the advancements in terms of the Citrix technology and how its performance has improved over the last little while. And you can do video conferencing, you can do Dragon, which is something we implemented with our system that most people don't think to do those things in a thin client environment, but we had a lot of success with that. So now we're really looking to push the envelope and see what else we can incorporate into the thin environment.
Thank you. Ray, can you please summarize some of the key lessons we've learned today?
As far as lessons learned for today, I mean, you know, the biggest thing is in these clinical areas, it's all about performance, right? Performance has to come first. If you can't give performance, all the IT operational benefits go by the wayside. For us, what we've always seen, and our benchmark that we sort of guarantee to our customers, is that we will get them 30-second initial logins. That first login of the day is going to be 30 seconds or less, and then the subsequent, you know, tap in or fingerprint in, the subsequent authentications into their virtual desktop, not just to the desktop, but to the applications that they were using, is going to be 10 seconds or less. If whenever we've seen that, and that's what we've always achieved, it's always been successful. Where we walked into environments where customers were struggling, we always found that they had one of those two, they were outside of one of those two parameters or outside of both, and that's when clinicians weren't happy. So, you know, those are really the biggest, I would think, lessons learned. And Aaron has one of my favorite concepts also on training, and, you know, making sure that the staff knows how to use the desktop, because it really is. We think it's simple because we're IT people, right? We just understand what's going on. But many of these people, I mean, one of the famous quotes I had from a nurse was when things started first going to electronic 10 years ago, she said, "I went into healthcare to get away from computers." And I was very politely said, "Well, I think you're going to be, you know, in front of a computer, you know, pretty much the rest of your life if you're going to stay in healthcare." And so they don't understand it. And, you know, so we as IT, we don't spend enough time making sure that they do get it and get them the right training. And Aaron coined a perfect way to describe it that was just simple to them, that I really am using with other customers. Your desktop is in your badge. And if you just, or if they're just going to use fingerprints instead of a badge, your desktop is in your finger. When you want to take it with you, you know, touch your finger over on the fingerprint reader or tap your badge. And when you want to use your desktop, walk to any device and put your badge down. Those are three of the biggest lessons learned that you know, I've heard here today, and they line up a lot with all of our other experiences.
Thank you. Thank you for that summary. Now, before we start the Q&A session, We encourage you to visit us if you will be attending the Cerner Great Lakes Regional User Group Conference, Citrix Synergy, or the Nutanix.next conference. And always, you can always find more information at cortexservices.com. And with that, we'll open up to the question and answers. If you have any questions, go ahead and type them into the question box. The first question is, are you only local to Michigan?
For Cortex Services, from a brick and mortar, we have brick and mortar in Michigan, but from a healthcare perspective, we service and work with healthcare organizations all over the U.S. From as far east as literally Maine, all the way down to New York, Florida, to Los Angeles, and everywhere in between. And again, some of our health systems are just regional to those areas. Some of them are national, and our largest customer has over 100,000 employees, and they are 30-something hospitals across the country. So we are everywhere, and we have consultants strategically located in different parts of the country to be able to work with our clients and make sure these are successful.
And we do have another question. What if you already have View in the environment?
If you already have VMware View in the environment, as Cortec, we work with both technologies. We have successful implementations in both. The biggest reason that we probably do more Citrix than VMware is, we got into this really before anybody, at least I know of, into doing this, identifying this workflow and this need. And 5-6 years ago, VDI wasn't ready, and it was cost prohibitive. And we learned that published desktops, a lot of use cases we filled with published desktops. And customers already own Citrix. As consultants, we look at what you own and then tell you to get certain performance metrics or workflows, what else you might need. So from a View perspective, I would tell you to reach out to us. If you're not getting, what you're talking about achieving here, we'd love to talk to you, because again, you should be able to achieve a satisfied, from an end user experience perspective, you should be able to achieve satisfied customers.
And we do have another question. How are you taking advantage of cloud technologies in this solution?
Cloud technologies. So we have a couple of customers. We have a few customers that are running out of the cloud. And it's been sort of our approach was a sort of walk, jog, run model in terms of we haven't went with all of our largest customers and everything off the bat, but we have, and we're starting, we're building in the size of customers doing this. We have some customers running out of the cloud. They're running out of Azure, and it's this. We have this full solution on the healthcare. We have some commercial ones, and they don't use Imprivata, but they use the other tools. And we have this from a healthcare perspective running out of Azure. We've needed, in those scenarios, we need to use Citrix for the purposes of most everything runs out of Azure, but we had to have some infrastructure. Occasionally, if you have a application whose database or data is in your local data center, like maybe a PACS viewer, for us to be able to effectively give the right performance inside the virtual desktop, we had to have some XenApp servers. They're local, close to the database of the client, to be able to deliver that app into the stack. We have our own Cortex Virtual Desktop Enhancement Suite and a module called Zap Now, which stands for XenApp Now, that allows us to, from a reconnect and performance perspective, give these, that's a second hop application, so an app delivered into a virtual desktop to do it very quickly, all right, to be able to deliver that stuff, but we have successfully delivered it. And it's been, our customers have loved it, and for those folks that might be having problems, all organizations are different in terms of whether they prefer operational costs or capital costs. But for folks who are getting a hard time getting approval for the upfront large capital expenditures, it's been a great option for them. And a lot more people are looking to pick up on it now that we have some customers that we've been successful with.
And I actually do have a few more questions. Does it matter what thin client you use?
Thin clients, the ones that being, and this will talk to, if you're using Imprivata, normally you're going to need something like an Imprivata. If you're not using Imprivata, if you use Centillion or HealthCast or the other two major ones that I've seen, what it is, I call them, those are the technology broker space, and for us, Imprivata has been by far the leader in that space. And what your biggest thing, I just came off a conversation like this with the customer, so I'll try not to be too verbose. What I'll try to tell you is, sure I can, is one of the main things to make sure you understand, if you want the third-party authentication and all the speed and all these things we talked about, you got to make sure your thin client works with that technology broker that you're using. For us, we work with HP, we work with iGel, and we work with Dell Wise. All three of those have integration into Imprivata, all right, and that's one of our, to work with a thin client vendor, that's the main prerequisite they have to have. Beyond that, if you want to understand that there are, to how you're successful depends on your strategy on which one of those is the best fit for you. And we can talk you through that. We can do a quick whiteboarding session sort of give you the pros and cons, because all of them have their certain fits and advantages depending on what your strategy is.
And I have actually a few more questions here.
Oh my goodness.
Very
great.
Yeah,
great.
Yeah. What about applications? We probably have at least 1,000, and many of them legacy. Can legacy applications be delivered to a VDI desktop?
Legacy applications to a VDI desktop. And you're talking about 1,000. The short answer I would tell you today is yes. The struggle and why is CoreTech, most of our customers, we have over 200,000 virtual desktops deployed in healthcare across the country. And, all those desktops, over 90-something% of those desktops are in clinical areas because they normally only have a fixed 15 or 20 apps that they want to deploy in those areas. And so for that reason, we can pack it into a image and it works. When you start going past that and you start getting a high number of applications and you start getting all those mix and matches of getting to those mix and matches where, the accounting department, they need this 25 applications, but, 10 of those apps are different than the pharmacy department, plus there's 5 people inside of finance that they need, one other additional different app. And you get all these app combinations is when things get to be hard to scale in a VDI environment, because then you're going to have to start supporting multiple images, app conflicts, and everything. And that's been, I've been looking for that utopia. We've worked with FinApp. We're very comfortable with AppV, and they've offset that some, but you can only get about 60 to 70% of the applications to work with those technologies. The folks that, quite honestly, where we're really looking, and based on where they are today, we've been monitoring them for a while. It looks like Unidesk and where they're at today, especially it released today, as a matter of fact, they have a 4.0 product that I think takes us to where we want to be able to really expand VDI from 30 to 40% of a clinical environment to getting to 80 to 90% of a clinical environment.
Yeah, we had quite a few legacy applications that we had to adjust to. Luke, I don't know if you can speak to that from our implementation.
I can speak briefly. We had a few applications that were actually conflicting with each other, so they actually could not exist on the same workstation, and we were able to use a technology like AppV to be able to package them up and so that they ran in their own bubble and essentially ran on the same image, but ran mutually exclusive. That is, they didn't know about each other. So not only did we were able to deliver a slightly better desktop now, because there were 2 applications that we could now actually run side by side, or at least make it look like that.
Yep, that's great point, Luke, and that's exactly how those technologies have helped out in the past. So.
And I do have a few more questions. What is the average cost per workstation, device, badge readers, software, etc.?
Boy, that one, I apologize, that one is a tough one, to be honest. I mean, as CoreTech, we can go through, we have what we call the BOM tool or bill of material tool. We can plug in technologies that you own, your size, what you need, and we can give some general costs, and then you can divide that. Into, divide that number. If we give you a number of $100,000 and it's 500 workstations, you can do the math on them, but they range significantly. That I don't have that. The things I can generally tell you is the published desktop. Typically, and that's where we can give that to 78% of use cases. Even though technologies have changed a lot, the Nutanix of the world and different technologies have really made VDI and advancements that the VDI companies such as VMware have made it a lot, less expensive, a lot more affordable. But it is still about half. It's 25 to 50% cheaper still to do a published desktop versus a VDI desktop. And that's why we still do a lot of that for the general clinical use case. And we just keep VDI desktops, just like what Allegiant saw, things like Dragon, some higher intensity graphics, or something really high processor off the charts, processing intensive, we'd use for those use cases. But unfortunately, I can't throw out numbers, but if you want to reach out to us, we could, in a 1-hour conference call, take information from you and give you a general estimate on what it would cost.
All right, and the next question is, what is the percentage of persistent versus non-persistent Zen desktops?
We are, 90%. I'd have to scratch my head, but I know we have had a couple, and quite honestly, it was dictated by customer, not by us, where we've had persistent desktop. We really do everything non-persistent. To me, once you go persistent, you are losing the operational value to going to VDI. We go for non-persistent. We use things like AppSense to, from the user's perspective, hold settings and provide that persistent experience, but still keep the desktop image non-persistent, so we can reduce the amount of images. Our goal every time we walk in is to keep it to 1 image. And I don't know of anywhere that we had more than 3, and that includes a published desktop image and maybe 1 to 2 VDI image pools. We just really stay away from it. That's also why we don't, until what Unidesk is doing, I really haven't seen that we can take customers more than 30, 40, 50% of their environment VDI, is because you would have to start creating all these image pools and some of these other persistence requirements when you want to have people install apps themselves.
All right, and the next question, what is the density you are seeing on the Nutanix platform? I assume a 3060 series. How many nodes?
Oh, somebody must be investigating Nutanix, and unfortunately, I am not enough of a Nutanix expert to answer that one. Luke and or Justin, just by chance, do you guys have any stats on your implementation you might be able to share? Sorry to put you guys on the spot, but I don't know if you can help me with this one.
Yeah, this is Luke. I think right now, just for the capacity that we need, we're seeing about either the combination of, for each node is running about either 40 desktops or servers that are for published desktop.
Okay. All right.
All right.
And I think, if I'm not mistaken, but you please correct me, I think a lot of your limitation desktop side is the amount of memory that Dragon is requiring, correct?
That's correct. We gave each one of those VDI desktops used for Dragon 6 gigs of memory. Okay.
And then once you guys get your memory expanded, you're probably going to get a larger, which is rare. It's usually not memory that is the constraint in an environment, but they're going to do some memory expansion from what I know, and that should be able to expand some more there. The other thing, Luke, if you don't mind sharing, I thought I saw a stat a few days ago that before Nutanix, when you guys were on your older infrastructure, and then when we went on the Nutanix infrastructure, that you guys got some definite performance benefits. Is that accurate? Did I read that correctly?
I can tell you we definitely got the benefit of having not to spend so much time on administration. So when we first looked at Nutanix, one of the things that they touted was you don't have to spend so much time administering the underlying systems, that is the server and the storage, and it seems to me that that's certainly true, that I rarely have to interact with the underlying systems as far as say, creating or expanding storage, or even really just having to monitor the system because the notifications work so well.
Got it. Got it. So to the person asking that question, if we didn't answer well enough, again, if you want to reach out, we can get you talking to one of our data center consultants and the folks who size these environments, and they can give you a lot better stats.
Thank you. So I think we have one more question here, and this person asked both Ray and the team at Allegiance to answer this one, so you guys can take turns. But what advice do you give to someone who wants to implement a VDI solution?
You want me to go first, Ray?
Yes, that would be great.
Absolutely.
Aaron, so really, as you talk to Ray, you can hear he lives and breathes this stuff, and so does CoreTech, and that was extremely helpful in lessening a steep learning curve, and our team really enjoyed working with them. So, even if it's not CoreTech, you find a partner that knows this stuff and lives and breathes it day to day, because it makes it much simpler in terms of rolling a complex technology like this out, and make sure that partner is willing to help teach your staff that has to support it, because that was advantageous for Luke and the team to be able to work side by side with CoreTech and rolling out a very complex solution that simplified the lives of the people that perform the clinical care within our environment.
Thanks, Aaron. Ray, anything you would like to add?
Yeah. Take the time. These things are large expenditures, and they could be game changers for your environment. So, not only to Aaron's point of getting the right people to work with you to reduce that, that learning cycle, but take the time to implement it successfully. Determine the key solution requirements. What's important for you? What do you want to get out of it? Go from back to forward. And what I mean by that is imagine what your end state is. What do you want it to end up being? And then work from there and decide what you got to do to get there. Do a use case assessment with, again, with a qualified company who can come in and deploy software to understand not only what the hardware, software, memory requirements will be for your virtual desktop, but to analyze the workflows through interviews and observation of how your people work. And lastly is testing, testing, testing. I'm going to quote John Wooten here. If you don't have time to do it right, when will you have time to do it over? It's one of the hardest things we have is getting our customers to test. And we can only do so much from the outside. We can functionally test and tell you if we tap a badge, the desktop comes in. But getting customers to take the time to come in and fully test things, it has always been tough. So embrace that challenge and understand that you're going to have to do it anyway. Right? If you don't have time to do it when it's time to test, how are you going to have time to do it when we go live and deploy? So that's the last thing that I would leave.
All right. That wraps up the Q&A session. I would like to thank everyone for joining today's session. We will be providing this recording and the case study to you. We encourage you to visit us if you will be attending the Cerner Great Lakes Regional User Group Conference or at Citrix Synergy or the Nutanix.next conference. You can always find more information at coretechservices.com.
Hannah, the one thing I'd like to throw out, while we have a booth presence at the Cerner conference, We don't have a booth presence at Synergy, but if you folks are happen to be going there and somebody would like to talk to us and talk about more details here, if you reach out to us, we will follow up with you, and we can set up an appointment in time to meet with you and talk about what you're trying to get resolved and what your goals are in more detail.
Thanks, Ray. Yes, great points there. But as always, you can find more information available to you at cortexservices.com. And thank you again to our panel and to you for joining. Enjoy the rest of your day.